millions upon millions of children are laid alone, suffering, starving, with bed sores, confused, in pain, mentally, physically, emotionally, unable to talk, unable to get up and walk away, unable to call for help. And so a child incarnates in a body which is defective, in a world which is defective. And they have parents who are defective. And they keep them alive not out of love and compassion, but out of fear that they will be prosecuted for infanticide if they don't. And these children are there in this bubble, this cocoon of a frequency of suffering like you have never imagined. This village, it will start the journey in collective human consciousness for us to recognize and see that these millions of invisible children are here. And perhaps we might get up and go to war for them and set them free. And in setting free one child, you begin to set free fallen consciousness for all of man. We have our very existence in a fallen world, and yet we need not be obedient to the fallen world and its ways. We as a species are a fallen species, and yet we are able to function without that fallen state being the driver of our life, the animator of our intelligence, of our decision making. The fallen world is a term that is often dismissed by many or deemed to be related purely to spiritual goings-on thousands of years ago. But the fallen world in our modern day sphere, I find, can be better explored, deprogrammed and explained using more modern language. Fallen angels are among the human species. They are afflicting us, and they do so not for the sake of it. They don't do it for the sake of being deceptive or just for fun, but they are organized. They are beings that have plans, they have propaganda, they have structure. They are beings that examine and study the psychology of the species that we are, so as they can make use of our collective energy, our collective consciousness and intelligence as humanity, to be guided as a resource towards their needs and what they want to see from it. If you apply only ancient language, you may lose track of potentialities that have occurred. We have, within the human organism we are, a certain hardware that makes us behave outside of the original design for humanity. That hardware causes humanity to incessantly build images within themselves in thought and memory. And that image then analyzes reality and analyzes its memories and makes decisions based upon that analysis. That is a space where the mind and the personal self and personal history is sitting in the driving seat of life. When we live from that space, from that hardware, we are controlled by whatever programs our mind has digested and believed, or we are controlled by our own emotions and their reactivity. We are controlled by the five senses and their addictions and impulses, and there the truth of what we are becomes lost inside the vessel, inside the flesh, as Yeshua called it. The truth of what we are, many have pointed at with the term soul, but I find it better to remain with unity, that we point at it with the term loving awareness. There is an awareness inside of the human organism you are that is aware of everything around you, meaning it is aware of your name, of your memories. It is aware of these external identities within the world that you have adopted and accepted, such as a nationality or a religion. It is aware of its own thought even. And yet very few slow down enough to recognize that awareness. But that awareness is a reality. And that awareness is caught inside the human organism. The same awareness that is aware I am saying this in you is the same awareness that is saying the things from this human organism. That awareness has a nature, and that nature is, to all the explorations that this human organism and the awareness within it has partook in, is Christic. There is a spark of the divine that has been brought into 3D realm, into time, space and matter, and its nature is one of unity. It is one of allowing unification with Creator, the love of Spirit that is found there, or of Christ that is found there, then animating the intelligence, direction and speech of the organism. When Yeshua said we must overcome the flesh and be guided by the Spirit, he meant overcoming the mind, the emotion, the addictions of the five senses. Overcoming them requires that you enter a new operating system. And keeping the light of awareness that we are, which is entombed in the body, if the body loses track of who it is and begins to believe the hardware of the knowledge of good and evil operating system, then the soul, the awareness, gets lost in the maze of the fallen world, of Maya and of the fallen body. And when it gets lost within there, it senses a separation from Creator, a void, and it searches in the world to fulfill that void. Every religion that is dominant in the West speaks of the fallen nature and of Satan and the fallen world. And yet we are approaching world events as if they are not here. We are approaching things such as war and division and politics as if it is not a spiritual battle. And yet it always is. It's true that we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but spiritual wickedness in high places. We wrestle not against the hardware of the fallen meat suit that we are in, but against the interdimensional species that created that hardware and are influencing humanity through those hacked elements of our existence. We, as a species, therefore, need to ensure that our intelligence, our speech, is always, to the best of our capacity, animated by the love of Christ, by the source code, by Spirit. Now that love is not an emotion. It is not an emotion generated by an ego and a human body, the love that we are referencing of spirit is a connection, an opening between the vessel and the Christic dimension. It is therefore the opportunity to bring into the fallen world, the energy extraction matrix of the fallen angels in which we incarnate, the original source code and its plans, to overwrite the sin matrix that we are in, having our energy extracted from us. We have wars raging all around the planet, but none is getting more media coverage than what is happening in Palestine and Israel. It is perfectly natural that there is outrage. If you wanted to create a dystopian irregularity in human love and peace, you would fence off a corner of the world, compact it with innocent men, women and children, and then you would bomb it. And you would hurt them, and you would torment them in the way that is happening now. Now, this is not me being pro-Palestine or pro-Israel. I am not going to descend into the knowledge of good and evil operating system, as if I do, I will feed my energy into the expansion of Satan's kingdom in this world. Terrible things happened in Israel. Terrible things are happening in Palestine. And yet the religious among us, who are supposed to know, especially Christianity, where there's not really any conflict on this topic from the teaching of Yeshua, there is a space in humanity where all conflict is diffused. And that space is where you are animated with compassion. And compassion animates man when duality is absent, the knowledge of good and evil. When Yeshua was with the position in his life where he embodied a dualistic event, he saw it and he controlled that dualistic event and he diffused that dualistic event. For they wished to stone a woman for committing adultery. Those in the crowd had taken sides. One side is that what you did is wrong, and so we must do this. The other side, which may have been silenced, may have been, well, perhaps we should let her go. But either way, duality ensued because they took sides. When we take sides and judge something as wrong and something as right, you are unable, due to the distortion in the vessel that you are, connect to that spirit, to that guidance of that love which is not an emotion but the opening to the Christic dimension. For it creates distortion, and that distortion means that the frequency connection needed between the organism and that dimension is severed. And so Yeshua said, let me put these people back away from the duality and the knowledge of good and evil operating system. And to do that, he said, let he who is without sin cast the first stone. Now, if they are honest with themselves, they will recognize immediately that there is none here without sin. And therefore, there is none who is able to cast the first stone. And therefore, what remains is the opportunity for intelligence to be animated by the compassion, the love of spirit, the Christic dimension, the source code programmer moving in the human organism. When the media pounds your life with the horrors of war, when the media pounds your life not only through mainstream media, but the awareness that social media has become the same tool. If you can stimulate a certain pocket of society to feel outrage at something, or another pocket of society to feel a sense of belonging with something, you can channel the energy of those human beings into taking sides. And in taking sides, their intelligence is no longer animated by spirit. It is animated by what they perceive to be right and wrong, which is the knowledge of good and evil operating system. It does not mean that we can't discern that it's wrong to bomb children and men and women. It does not mean that we can't discern that it's wrong to attack somebody. It doesn't mean that, but what it means is that if we allow our awareness to move into that duality of judgment, spirit is unable to animate the vessel. And without spirit animating us, we are left to be animated with our ignorance, for spirit has an all-knowing compassion that can allow us to build on its behalf. There is no party here that is calling for compassion as far as I've seen. No party is calling to end conflict by calling on the unity which is compassion. Instead, it is always tainted with a judgment that you're wrong and this is right. And due to that, the fire of spirit is not catching a hold as yet to animate the intelligence of those sides that are persistently volleying violence at one another. These fallen angels, these interdimensional beings, this is what they do. This is what they want. They want us to move into duality. I have a role in this world to be an opening for that spirit to build and animate its will here for a particular demographic of marginalized and suffering children. And I am doing it. But to do that, I have not been able to read any books for many years, as I spend most of my time alone, allowing that connection, that harmonic attunement with spirit to overtake what I am, and therefore allow me to the best of my human capacity, as I am a fallen being as well, see the hardware of the fall and how it keeps capturing humanity's awareness and dragging it into the fallen world in its conflicts, in which there is never an end, and the only benefit from us going into those conflicts is that we end up in separation, and that separation feeds the fallen one's hope as humanity's intelligence as a resource, a collective output of intelligence as a resource. If we continue to not see what our mind and emotion is doing, then we are unable to deprogram the enslavement of the fallen nature, the hardware of the knowledge of good and evil operating system. The fallen angels, as far as I have seen, are an interdimensional species, and they are organized, they are meticulously planned. They deceive as a virtue, and organized meticulous deception is not limited by the boundaries of the goodness of your imagination. That means that what you can imagine as deception is a tiny fragment of what they are willing to do. They believe in lies, they believe in deception, they believe those who fall for it are weak and stupid. And therefore we live in a world where that is present, and there are elements of society revealing to you that truth. El Salvador, at present, the leader of El Salvador, has taken the country from being the most dangerous country in the world for murder rates to being the safest country in the Western Hemisphere in just 3 years. The leader and his parliament seek the wisdom of God before they do anything. There are those who argue that it's inhumane what they have done, but those who are in a fallen state and are harming and endangering the presence in society of peace and unity are in need of spiritual reconciliation. Leaders who do not go to God first are not getting results like this. If you put God first, what that means is that you are putting the space inside of us where you have a connection to something beyond this dimension. This is, to El Salvador, a spiritual war, and they are getting results. They have acknowledged that Satanism and human sacrifice was a part of those elements of society that they have imprisoned, and are now working with how to deal with this and rehabilitate. And as such, they recognize it was a spiritual war. They may perceive the spiritual war through religious dated language, but I would say that there is an interdimensional species who are harvesting energy from the human species, and they do so by taking the awareness that is entombed in the body and the mind, as it were, and dragging it into frequency ranges whereby the fallen ones who operate at these lower frequencies can access it. The light of Creator is a fuel. It is an energy source. And if you can trick that light into believing a reality that you have had an influence in creating and altering, then you, through the sentient life and free will, can have that light surrender itself into the possession of frequency ranges that are low enough that you can absorb it or extract it. This species that is interdimensional is harvesting energy from this planet. And every time we go into a war and we get dragged into the duality of it, even if we are observers not inside the nation, when you're in the nation and you're being bombed and being attacked, you're in another position completely, as you are forced into the fight or flight survival mode to protect those that you love. This is a space where it's very hard to stand with compassion, and yet some still can. Some still can see that this is not a war between these human concepts of nationalities and religion, but of a spiritual force, interdimensional force, who is trying to cause these conflicts to extract our soul essence. When you are an observer from the outside, you have space to call to be animated by compassion. But the problem is this: the fallen ones have lured us with this hardware within us, which is being hacked, as it were, into generating an image of what we are and identifying and clinging to it. And that image is predominantly of the world and not of our origin. We are from the Christic realm. We are the light of Christ in human form. We are here. We have incarnated in a fallen world. And I am certain that interdimensional technologies that are not based on the creation of unity with Creator, but in rebellion with Creator, a hope to be God yourself, have played a role in our incarnation here. However, whilst we are here, our duty to follow Christ, to allow the Spirit to animate our intelligence and our speech, is to ensure that external identities that were created by human thought do not become what we are. Israel and Palestine. Israel is a concept created by human thought. Palestine is a concept created by human thought. Hamas is a concept created by human thought. Judaism is a concept created by human thought. Islam is a concept created by human thought. Christianity is a concept. They are all creations of human thought, and they only exist from human thought. And on a time on earth before any of these structures that we created with words and thoughts and symbols and writings, etc., and a time before they existed, humanity was still here, and we were still able to relate to the living God, the God of compassion and spirit, and it simply had no name. It didn't have the same names as others have given it within inside these religious structures, but guaranteed, if you delete the memory of humanity, of all of these religions and all of these structures and all of these nationalities, what remains is a human that is aware and a human that can unify with the living God. or can unify with the world as its identity. If you delete every religious memory from us all, that is still the process that the five senses will take the awareness within it through. And as that process begins, we may create religions to describe this unified presence with Spirit and Creator. And then what happens is that people's minds come in and make an image not out of the process of unification with Creator, but out of the writings of that which was pointing towards that. What is the point of any religion if not to unite a man here and now so that he makes the right compassionate action? And humanity is fallen. We don't have that compassion available to us. It must come from a supernatural connection, which is the Spirit, the Spirit of God's love, the Christic dimension, open with us. If that is open, you will feel stimulated to tell your fellow man, you won't believe what I found, and this is why you are behaving like this. You're creating war, you're betraying people, because you haven't opened this connection to Christ or to the source code programmer. And so you start writing, trying to explain to people how to get there, and it's very difficult with words to establish that the connection is now or it's never. Only will a man know the love of God here and now, or he will never know it. That's the beauty of grace. You don't have to work towards it through a linear progression, etc. It's here. The working towards it animates the hardware of the fallen nature, and the frequency is distorted and you don't get the connection. And yet then people have come in, and their mind, instead of seeking the connection with that other worldly origin of our soul and allowing it to animate them, builds an identity based on the teachings that were pointing you to there. Therefore, you have humans who are absolutely certain that they are an Israeli, that they are a Jew, that they are a Muslim, that they are a Palestinian, that they are an Englishman, that they are whatever it may be. And in that absolute rigid certainty, they don't acknowledge that these are identities based in human thought and memory, that they've been passed to, or they are seeing structures that have been created in their reality off the back of human thought, and they identify that they belong to those structures created by human thought. Human thought is creating the structures, creating the religions in which we are divided and coming back into ourselves, hoping that these structures that are creating chaos and war, that they will fix us. But it was thought itself that created them, and it was thought itself that needs fixing. And so you are asking the creation of thought to return to you and repair and heal itself. And it can't. And it never will. And therefore, those who identify heavily that they are an Israeli, they have an identity based in the world. And this is a hard pill to swallow. Those who believe they are Muslim have an identity that is in the world. But those who acknowledge and say, yes, I follow Judaism, yes, I'm Israeli, yes, I'm a Muslim, yes, I'm a Christian. Those who perceive and understand that these religious structures are helpful only if they can point the awareness that you are here and now to a space that is beyond identification with the world, meaning here and now the vessel is able to open up that connection to that higher dimension of spirit and allow its intelligence to be animated by that love and unity that is felt there. There's no other purpose for religion than that, and yet we've lost ourselves in it. We've lost ourselves in external identities based in the world, and external identity with things that have been created in human thought within the world. This is a terrible situation, for you cannot stand with compassion there. For if we continue to not acknowledge that we cannot be that which we are aware of, then we cannot find unity. I am aware that I was born in England and people would call me an Englishman. I am aware that I largely point at the living God's presence and ability to guide our lives with Christian framework. And yet, if I am aware of these things, I am aware that I am a father, I am aware that I am the founder of a charity. If I am aware of them, clearly the one that is aware is not them. They are external worldly labels to help the awareness I am function. If my awareness, however, goes into these identities and says, this is what I am, then I am no longer conscious. And when I am no longer conscious, as I believe that I am these self-generated images and labels and words, I am no longer present with the living God. And I can say that I know God's love and I know God's unity, but it's coming from memory and intellect. It's not coming from the connection, the presence of the living God animating my speech and my intelligence today. The fallen angels know this. That's why they enslaved us with this hardware. That's why they created within inside humanity this part of us that separates us from God. For in that space of separation, where we can even identify with religion which is about God, and use that to sidestep the reality of God's love and peace, and use it to go to war, then the fallen angels have us in their possession, in the hope that we will continue to generate energy for them. And these fallen angels are an interdimensional species. They are organized, they are meticulous, they are technological. They have influence on humanity. They were always among us. They've always been here throughout every power structure, which if you look at their symbolism, the power structures didn't really shift and change. They just explored how it is that they continue to farm and harvest the frequencies of humanity's suffering. Give us civilization, give us technology, give us medicine, but give us immense suffering throughout it. There's no greater suffering than luring a human being into a sense of peace and harmony and beauty and then crushing their lives from nowhere. And this happens day in, day out here. And those that are used to crush their lives, to harm them, to hurt them, to murder, to steal, they are the humans who have bought into the hardware of the fall as their identity. And therefore they have no joy of the presence of the Spirit of God. And so they incessantly search in the world for pleasure, and that pleasure becomes perversion, and that perversion can become distorted into psychotic behavior, which we see very prevalently with sexual perversion predominantly and things of this nature. People who feel that this world is a horrible place, and so they must gratify their most dark desires to feel some release from it. The reality is their awareness got brought into the maze of the fallen nature, the knowledge of good and evil operating system, and got lost there. And those who are salivating for the war in the Middle East, those who are cheering that Israel is going to destroy this evil, you have played into Satan's hands, and you are not behaving in a Christian manner, which is where I keep seeing it. For let he who is without sin cast the first stone. Christians should be standing, followers of the way, those who believe what Yeshua taught, not what the church is telling you, should be able to stand at this united and call one unified message. Let he who is without sin cast the first stone. Compassion, let Christ's compassion animate your intelligence. And instead, we've been lulled into the knowledge of good and evil operating system, and we say, yeah, hurt them, harm them, bomb them, torture them. And it's wrong. It's opposed to the teachings of Christ, and it feeds the fallen energy extraction matrix in such a horrendous way. I have no doubt that the media coverage and the stimulation of this was done by an interdimensional species. Some have called it satanic, the fallen angels. I have no doubt. I just expand on that and say, I've seen them. They have technology. And whilst everybody's sitting watching their Netflix and drinking their alcohol and chasing their pleasures and scoffing at those of us who have sat still and harmonically resonated with all of creation and its creator, the source code, the Christ, it is not unsurprising that our ability to decode expanded bandwidths of reality are beyond your own. You have lived externally, you haven't gone within and developed yourself. And for those who do not grasp this, Christianity was supposed to lead you back to the reality that you are God's child, here and now the living God. If your Christianity is not allowing you to do that, and you are constantly identifying as an external image based around the creation of human thought, and therefore instead of having the connection with the Christ so that it can animate your life and guide your life, you are instead having an external identity that is a Christian or an American or whatever it may be, or a Muslim or whatever, then you are playing the game of living in the fallen state whilst dressing it in paraphernalia about God's presence and love. But God's presence and love is here. It is now. It is an awakened spiritual rebirth state of consciousness, and it will animate your intelligence. And when that happens, you will build on its behalf. And that's why the pantomime is hard to engage. It is, of course, horrendous what is happening in Gaza. I can't imagine if I was there with my children. My heart aches for them. It aches. And I can't imagine being in Israel where families are filled with such seething hatred and ungodliness. And I can't imagine how it is for the families in Israel who suffered losses from the terrible events in October. I can't. But what I can do is stand when people are drawn into the knowledge of good and evil operating system and feeding the matrix of why we are here, why the fallen world is, that I can say the only way out of this is to stand with compassion. Let he who was without sin cast the first stone. As Rumi said, out beyond your ideas of wrongdoing and right doing, there's a field, I'll meet you there. There's still wrong or right, but the field is the Spirit of God animating your intelligence, and it is all-knowing, and you are not. And so it should be allowed the opportunity to use your hands and feet. We are in a world where the hope is to get the light of awareness that we are, which comes from the dimension of Christ, to forget where it's from and what it's about. And the devil himself and the fallen ones, they are at war with God, and they say, our reality can lead your children away from you. That's how strong we are with our technology and our ability to hack the source code. That's how potent our rebellion is. We can take children of God. We can create our own augmented reality around them, and we can make them forget you. We can make them forget where you are from. And largely, as I look around, it's happening. It's happening because we believe that we are the five senses. We believe that we are our emotional nature. We believe we are the image of self based in thought and memory. We believe within that image of self that we are a composite of creations from human thought that once did not exist, and therefore if we had our birth before they existed, we were still here. Therefore we were never an Englishman or an American or a Christian or a Muslim. We were always something other than. And yes, these structures are useful and helpful and beneficial, but these structures are an attempt to organize humanity with thought. They are an attempt, therefore, to organize humanity with the operating system of the knowledge of good and evil of the fall. And what we are not doing is attempting to organize the system with something other than thought. And something other than thought is faith and the connection to spirit. And yet when those around us have a little glimpse of doing so, we get results, such as El Salvador at this time, where they are having a very beautiful result for their people. Because there's some fragment there of an agreement to animate things not on thought and human analysis and human intellect alone, but on the connection with the divine leading our intelligence. But sadly your leaders are in pacts with the fallen, be it openly or be it through their hidden perversions, either way energetically. They are, some, aware that the fallen are here, this interdimensional species. Princess Diana herself said that the royal family are literally not human. Why? Because they believe they belong to a lineage, a bloodline, that allows the bringing forth into this dimension of the will of these other dimensional forces who do it to extract our energy, as the only infinite fuel source is the light of God. And the only way they can access it, as they operate in such low, deceptive, rebellious frequencies, is to harvest it by getting humans who have that light within them to bring it into their possession. We have become enslaved to an interdimensional slave technology. And these beings are creating all of the conflict and all of the war, even if they are not directly possessing and influencing a person. For they are the ones who put the hardware in us that distances us from one another and Creator. For all separation, all conflict begins with separation, and all separation begins with thought. For when you enter the space and consciousness where there is no thought, unity and that opening to the love of Spirit awakens. I shall leave it there. I love you all. God bless.